Empires are not a new thing. They've existed for thousands of years. But typically we don't think about empires too much.
Ethically, at least.
Except for one. One empire that tries to brand itself with the labels of freedom and democracy, which it has never had since the get-go. Welcome to America. The story of how the United States came to be is brutal. It tries to be justified because it laid a framework, and they weren't perfect. In reality, these people were huge hypocrites who, a majority of the time, barely scratched fulfilling their promises and laid the framework for genocide and slavery.
The U.S. Empire's constitution was pandering from the beginning. They used ideas such as all men are created equal to make it seem as though they were revolutionary and had good morals. In reality, they did this to make it seem as though they were moral people, but they weren't, and that is clear in their actions and also their inspiration. Montesquieu, the guy who believed in religion tolerance and separation of powers, believed slavery was moral right.
Slavery, properly so called, is the establishment of a right which gives to one man such power over another as renders him absolute master of his life and fortune.
You see, he says right clearly indicates that he believed slavery was a God-given right. You may also have heard of a man called John Locke, the father of the modern liberalism, who worked with and completely approved of slavery, though he claimed to be against it. When it benefited him, he would take advantage of slavery, just like all other liberals of that time.
In a Jacobin article, linked in the description, it details John Locke's pro-slavery entanglements as well as his flip-flopping on the issue. In the book Treatise, he tries to justify slavery and that property rights don't apply to hunter-gatherer societies like the Native Americans. He also invested in the English slave trade with the Royal African Company and the Bahama Adventurers Company.
Slavery of blacks and genocide of Native Americans was always ingrained into the system, a feature, not some oversight. The evidence in the way Thomas Jefferson felt about America manifest destiny, which echoed
how
the other founding fathers felt.
Premised on the rights of property, the American Revolution, its causes, motivations, and objectives, would allow the white settlers to pursue their happiness by obtaining Indian lands and black slaves.
If you ever wonder where the pursuit of happiness part of Constitution came from, well, here you go. One can only imagine what other parts of the Constitution come from racist and deplorable acts such as this. Furthermore, these are Jefferson's thought on Native Americans siding with the slightly less evil British.
Jefferson wrote to Baron von Humboldt that because these tribes had taken up the hatchet against the United States, it, quote, obliged us to now pursue them to extermination or drive them to new seats beyond our reach, quote.
Jefferson was dead set on setting the Indian question. I wonder what the reminds me of.
That's right, folks. We inspired the Nazis, and what to do and how to achieve it. If you ever wondered what Nazi Lebensraum was like, it was very similar to American Manifest Destiny. Phrases like, go east, young man, in Nazi Germany were inspired by phrases like, go west, young man, in early America. The only difference between the Nazis and the Americans was that the Nazis had to go through a highly industrialized Europe to conquer what they wanted. Meanwhile, the Americans fought people who used sticks and stones. Pretty easy to see why the American settler colony exists today, while Nazi Germany was dissolved in 1945. More evidence of this is found when Hitler literally said that the Americans did settler colonialism first and succeeded. Why can't the Nazis do that as well?
In the East, a similar process will repeat itself for a second time as in the conquest of America.
In an article by The New Yorker titled, How American Racism Influenced Hitler. In the article, it states,
In 1928, Hitler remarked approvingly that white settlers in America had gunned down the millions of Redskins down to a few 100,000. When he spoke of Lebensraum, the German drive for living space in Eastern Europe, he often had America in mind. Later in the article, it stated, Whitman methodically explores how the Nazis took inspiration from American racism of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He notes that, in Mein Kampf, Hitler praises America as the one state that has made progress towards a primarily racial conception of citizenship by, quote, excluding certain races from naturalization.
There are books on the extent of this, such as James Q. Whitman's Hitler's American Model, the United States and Making of Nazi Race Laws, which go into far greater detail. But you may be thinking, how does this relate to the Constitution? I think it's quite obvious. Inspiring the Nazis in their path, showing that the Americans follow the supposed ideals of the Constitution, and systematically killing the natives doing that either? No, and it will never. If you say otherwise, you might need help.
It is clear that the Constitution was never a genuine document. It was and still is a barrier to progress and laid the framework of a genocide and slavery. Yes, it is amendable and changes are able to be made, but at the end of the day, it inhibits radical change. And every single other country in the world does not treat their constitution like the gospel. They change their constitutions every few years and don't think of it as a big deal. Why? Because many of long, rich history and their countries, while we have this. A legacy of a settler colonialism and slavery. If we don't mythologize our past, what American legacy and history do we have to fight for?